to another episode of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions. This is Michael Cross here with what I hope will be a very stimulating discussion on, well, it's going to be on relationships. But hold on just a minute before I actually tell you exactly what I mean by that. First, if I just have to always throw this plug in, if you want to listen to some of the past shows with many of them featuring guests, then please go to my YouTube site at Michael Cross. It's the one that will say Freedom from Conscience, my book series. And for articles dealing with this and a lot of other issues, please go to michaelcross.net. And hey, if you're one of those people that uses Twitter, you can add me at PsychoMike777. Okay, now all of that being said, what I want to do is deal with what I believe may be the likely future of human relationships. Now, I'm going to mostly center this on the United States and Western Europe, because while I think that many of the world, you can't get around that with globalization. Both with economic globalization comes cultural globalization, and with that will come everything that the West is famous for. I know people that outside of Western countries are probably going, oh, great. Okay, but the thing is that our communication system today reaches all across the world. There are no national boundaries. You know, television, back during the Cold War in the 1980s, television reached into countries that were under, Soviet rule. And that had a profound impact on people because they saw, even though they might not even understand the language, they still saw people living what they believed was a very rich lifestyle. So if they were watching, I don't know, what was popular, what I read in those days was like Charlie's Angels and Dallas and those kinds of shows that tended to show glamour, opulence, beautiful women, handsome men driving great cars. Okay? And it was kind of a fiction, but it still carried appeal to people. And so the thing is that our media, and I've dealt with this a lot in previous shows, our media has a far greater impact than we really do give it credit for. The thing is, a lot of times, and I've met many people, and maybe even myself back, before the internet age, would watch news programs, TV shows, and so forth, and I had my opinions on things, and then the media would always seem to be attacking those opinions. They would always be showing the more left-of-center viewpoint. And what happens when you're always being exposed to the left-of-center viewpoint, if that's the monopoly, that existed during the 1980s and 90s, when it comes to the major media, and it's only gotten more concentrated since then, if that's all that you have exposure to, then what happens is you're going to hold your opinions, but you're going to become maybe less and less convinced of whether they're right or not, if they're always being questioned. If everyone's an atheist, you're going to question a lot more than if you're living in an area where everyone's Christian. I mean, it's just the way it is. We kind of absorb the attitudes around us. And if we really hold firm, then there's like a cognitive dissonance that exists. And sometimes, when your kids are always watching the news and TV programs from Hollywood and so forth, then many times they don't have those strong convictions you do. And this is what's changing society today. Now, let me throw out the first thing. Now, I'm going to get to economics, but I'm going to throw out something I found very interesting when I first read it. And there was an article. You can look this up for yourselves if you're out there. Of course you're out there. You're listening. Okay. October 18th, 2012, Gallup poll and it's dealing with human sexuality. So October 18th, 2012. Now, what I found interesting was I have a lot of psychology background in university. And so you do stay attuned to the things that are going on when it comes to issues such as social psychology, what people are thinking and so forth. And it seems that there is a great deal of discussion in journals about where people's attitudes on human sexuality and sexual orientation and those kinds of things. Now, what was really something that I think it's even something that people believe today to a large degree, but it was really something strong in the 1990s, was that sexual orientation was a fairly constant number. There seems to be a certain number of people, and it usually, depending on who you were listening to and what studies they were using, it was somewhere between 10%, which usually was based on like Kinsey type research, which I believe had a lot of flaws, and what I believe were more accurate surveys of, how many people were gay and so forth, which is around 3%, 3.5% of the males, about 1.5% of females. And bisexuality didn't really factor in that strongly back in, a lot of these surveys. However, if you look at the study, the survey that was done in Gallup, and it was reported in 2012, you find a very interesting trend taking place. The question is, do you personally identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender? And if we look at 15 to 64-year-olds, you've got a yes for the overall population of 2.6%, less than 3%, and no, 93.1%. And for 18 to 29, however, you've got yes, 6.4%. Okay, that's more than double. And no at 90%. Now, the thing that you have to look at that's very telling is the gender difference. When it comes to males, 18 to 29, let's aim mostly at millennials. They're the ones that are forming families or not forming families, okay? 65-year-old and above, it really doesn't matter what they do because they're not, for the most part, contributing to the gene pool anymore. So, we can be sentimental towards our parents and grandparents and so forth, but they're not reproducing. Demographically, it's not an issue. And so we look at the 18 to 29-year-old men, and you got yes, 4.6%, which of course is about double of the men 50 to 64. And for women, on the other hand, you have yes, 8.3%. Now that's an interesting figure, 8.3%, and surveys I've seen seem to indicate that's more bisexuality than lesbianism. But that's been a remarkable increase. Now, some people will say, well, maybe people were just not as apt to answer accurately in surveys in the past. I don't necessarily buy that. I really do think there is a shift because I've actually told people about the human sexuality test, and you'll find that what you will find there is a survey that you take the test and it kind of gives you a range. And what I've noticed is that range is, maybe 10 years ago or so, whenever maybe the test, when it first came out. Anyway, it was quite a few years ago. The test seemed to have most people clustered towards heterosexuality, with maybe some of the women kind of gravitating to bisexuality. But it seems that nowadays, at least the people I've told about, and then they take it and then they share their information, it seems to be that it's almost the norm in some ways for bisexuality amongst young women. And it's growing for young men. Now, you may say whatever, and we could say whatever, but people have to recognize that this is a monumental shift. And the thing is, in the past, yes, richer societies where the very elite of the population, we know for a fact that there were many kings and queens and emperors and empresses, and the super rich, they've lived a lifestyle that's, maybe not quite as conventional as the middle class type people do. I mean, Marie Antoinette, she was a queen, married to the king of France, and she had kids, but she also had a lesbian lover. And she's not the only one. I mean, and you want to look at, lifestyles of the rich and kind of decadent, you could look up Catherine the Great. And the thing is that this was always something that was confined to popes and kings and queens and emperors and empresses and the super rich, this kind of decadent lifestyle. However, and I mean decadent meaning that, kind of do as you wish, and kind of the Aleister Crowley, ordinary morality is for ordinary individuals, quote. But the thing is that with modern communications, now people can indulge in this, and it's exposed to everybody. You no longer have people 45, 50 years old learning about something going, you mean people do that? Because usually it's their kids and grandkids who are even in their early teens that know all about it because they've gone on the internet and they've seen it numerous times. So this is having a monumental change in society. And I think it's going to continue, in which, and this is my prediction, and, it may just be mostly centered on your white middle class Europeans and Americans, but, and maybe not as much in other groups. I don't know, but just for the middle class, I think what you're going to wind up with is you're going to wind up with a situation in which people become what a lot of younger people are claiming, at least in surveys in England. When they're asked what their orientation is, it's going to be mostly straight. And that may change to where it's whatever in 20 years' time. Now you're probably thinking, wait a minute, come on. That's a huge change. Relationships are going to look just like they do today. There'll be a few people doing this and a few people doing that, but most of them will gravitate to the conventional ways. Well, look back 20 years ago. If you were to go back through time 20 years ago and be watching news programs and TV shows, you'd be like, whoa, I'm just, where am I? Salt Lake City? I mean, it's so conservative. Well, the truth of the matter is, even the kids in Salt Lake City now are watching these kinds of programs and stuff. And this changes people's attitudes. And of course, there's porn and there's music videos and there's magazines and all of these kinds of things, which lay into question the, man, woman gets married and, well, at least in Western society, has a kid or two. Okay? That is being laid to question. And with the internet, people can connect to one another. You can get groups of people that people are communicating. They get to meet each other. And what may have been, kind of unusual in the past, but a person could never actually wind up meeting the person, will become more common. I was talking to a lady one time, and she was very conservative Republican, Mormon woman, and she confided to me. She actually said, it would be kind of fun to experiment with lesbianism, but how would you meet anyone? Now, of course, that was before the internet. This was, the people having the internet. That was back in the, late 1980s maybe that I knew this person. So the thing is that this is not even a problem now. People can go to social events. People can connect on the internet. And, this could lead, and this is my personal opinion, this could lead to things like polyamory and polygamy growing in popularity. in the near future. Now, I'm going to get back to that because I think there's some economic aspects I need to take into account here. But first, I wanted to quote from another source on the future. And again, people are going, man, I don't know if the future is going to be all this. I really seriously don't think the future is going to be more conservative. If you take a look at, social trends today, I do not think we're necessarily going to see more social conservatism. If we have economic conservatism, it's going to be because we're all going to go broke because there's not enough kids being born and the welfare system will collapse. But when it comes to social, not sure you can really put the genie back in the bottle unless there's like a really major religious revival or something. I don't know. But there's a therapist. Her name is Laura Berman. And, she's featured in an article in the Wall Street Journal. I don't have the date right now, but I'll just give you the title. The Future of Sex. It Gets Better. Now, in it, she makes some things I think are not necessarily all that unusual. She says, if we want, we'll be able to procreate without meeting in person. Reproductive technology is rapidly evolving. People do this all the time anyway. It's called artificial insemination and IVF. There are millions of kids out there now in the world who their mom and dad never met. In fact, their moms may be virgins. Yeah, the definition of a virgin is a woman who's had sexual intercourse with a man, and a woman is asexual and has never been with a man, or is a lesbian. She's still technically a virgin. So therefore, who knows? Maybe thousands of children out there that are the products of virgin birth. And, I still hear people say, well, Jesus, Virgin Mary, all that stuff, that's just so weird and radical. It takes place every day. Okay? Technology does it. It's just like when people talk about, well, I don't believe the Bible because how could someone like Noah live 900 years? And then at the same time, you can find, science articles almost every day in mainstream publications predicting the future of one being, people being immortal. Okay? Science again is showing that anything is possible. In fact, even the Bible says, with humans, if they're united, nothing is impossible. Okay? Get into Tower of Babel and all that stuff, but I don't want to get in that right now. Anyway, the thing is, it even she predicts that you may even have situations where two parents and three parents just donate genetic material. It could be that if you're a Japanese couple and you really like, Japanese animation and like manga and stuff like that, which, I've seen a lot of, art that way. Because my daughter's kind of like that. And, you got people, Japanese characters with blonde hair and blue eyes and, those kinds of features. You could just get a little bit of DNA from someone from, I don't know, northern Germany, and voila, you got a kid who's Japanese. Both parents Japanese, but a little tiny bit of DNA from some Nordic guy, and now the kids are blonde. And I think this kind of genetic engineering is going to get big time. And when you have this kind of genetic engineering, what happens when two women can then just go in and produce a child together? That's going to be really weird, isn't it? I mean, think about the genealogy on that one. Two mothers. And I mean, literally two mothers, not a woman married to another woman who one of them carries a baby. Okay? It'd be literally two mothers instead of a father being involved. Unless, yes, you could technically say the male DNA would come in from the contribution would come in from both their fathers, but still, two women, baby. Let's see here, some other stuff that she's predicting. As she states here, further, labeling our sexual orientation will be a thing of the past. A new tide of young men and women are embracing a range of sexual expression, describing themselves as mostly straight. Again, that term. But open to same-sex love if it occurs. In addition to gay marriage becoming legal everywhere in the USA, who would have predicted that 10 years ago, I have no doubt the transgender community will make amazing strides when it comes to civil rights and being understood and celebrated. And, well, again, I just say if you look at trends, if you could graph these kinds of things, you would see that, yes, the majority of people are against gay marriage in the United States. However, and in Europe, of course, I think you have a majority for it, at least in Northern Europe and Great Britain. However, those that are against it, when it does get enacted, like I said before, when it comes to the media and social conditioning, is that it gets enacted and it's kind of like oh, well, what can you do? Versus maybe 30 years ago, people have been freaking out. And there was lots of people saying, oh, they're going to freak out, but they were still thinking people were the same as they were 30 years ago. And they're not. Yes, on an opinion survey, they may say, well, I don't like this, but they're not going to freak out about it. And the opinion surveys will generally show that the older people are more likely, actually, it's more like, from my understanding, it's more like middle-aged people are more likely to be opposed to it, whereas elderly are more accepting of these kinds of social trends, and the very young. It could be the elderly people spend a lot of time watching TV. And, of course, the very young, they've got social media. I mean, believe me, if you go on Tumblr, if you go to Instagram, Pinterest, there's a lot of stuff out there that would probably really surprise you. Okay? Just go on Tumblr, sign up for Tumblr and type in anything. And you may be really, really surprised. They don't have the same rules as Facebook and so forth. But the Tumblr is mostly younger people. Not all. There's probably elderly people there, but it's mostly younger people, and it can give you a little bit of an indication of where things are kind of at, where their hangouts are on the internet. And what's kind of funny about that, though, is the more the older people go on there and maybe set up their own because they want to show off their photography or something like that, it'll force the young people to find something else to go to. But anyway, the thing is that the younger population is getting a whole different type of entertainment, you might say, and also exposure than the older generation got. Now, kind of interesting is when I'm speaking about exposure to different ideas, I was reading an article that was talking about Philip Zimbardo, the famous psychologist from the Stanford prison experiment things. And basically, there's a problem when it comes to young men. Again, this is going to go into relationships, and, we don't even have to go into the whole, men going their own way. MGTOW or whatever it is. I know I mentioned that in another video one time, and a lot of guys were like totally freaking out, and I did not condemn the people per se. I said, well, this is going to force women to actually find other alternatives at having families if lots of men leave the marriage pool. I didn't say that their concerns were not important, but here it does say, you got absent fathers, economic downturns, failing schools, maybe legislation that tends to favor women. If there's a lot of programs out there, they'll say, we need to get young girls more interested in science as a career. And, well, if you're a guy, and maybe you're kind of on edge, whether it's, you're a fence sitter. Well, should I go into a science career or something like that? There's really nothing out there saying, besides your parents maybe, that are going to really be pushing for you to do it. Versus girls have programs that are going to be promoting this. And a lot of people feel this is to make up for past exclusion. But now maybe things have turned around to where many young males, 14, 15, 16, really don't have a place. They don't feel they're connected anymore, and that the system works for them. Okay, I'm just saying how many of them feel. And, I know someone's probably thinking, you're saying, no, I am saying this is how they feel. And this can create some problems there. And the The thing is, when you have stuff that, guys like excitement and so forth. And, we have what? Nowadays, as Zimbardo points out, there's pornography, really hardcore pornography, not the kind that, young, urban, what used to be called yuppie couples, turn on when the kids are all put to bed upstairs and watch together, but, really hardcore stuff. And gaming that's becoming more and more and more realistic. Gone is the days of Pac-Man and that sort of thing. Take a look at the games that young men are playing now. So there's a lot of alternatives, so to speak. And, maybe there's this kind of idea that they get this vicarious reward in the virtual world. It's not a real world, but it's a virtual world. And sometimes they'll feel like, well, if I want to have a real woman, I can just go to a singles bar and find someone and, occasionally do that. So this is breaking down the idea of people having traditional marriage. But now here's the interesting thing. I even read an article today, and I think this is something that just happens with advanced societies. And that is in Iran now. Iran, okay? We're saying Iran, conservative Iran. Most of the university students in science and mathematics and stuff like that are women. Now, the thing is, I'm just bringing it up because a lot of people would think, no, that can't be the case. Well, Iran's different than many other parts of the Middle East, but the thing is that in the West, we find the same thing. More women are going into university now. Now, thing is, our economy has totally shifted ever since Bill Clinton. You could say to a large degree Bill Clinton's, responsible for it because the trade deals he signed with China, it has actually benefited China, and so forth. But the thing is that if you look at a graph of factory jobs, right after he signed that legislation, down, okay? It had been steadily going down, until suddenly, nosedive after that legislation. Now, the thing is that most of those jobs were male-oriented jobs. Now, in a service economy, often you're going to have lower paid jobs. And at the same time, women do not want to date below themselves, generally speaking, okay? Statistically. I know there's this kind of romantic attitude that's kind of promoted in TV shows sometime of the rich girl and the poor guy. But it's usually not that way. People tend to hang out with people of similar IQs, same education, same social values. Social classes tend to marry each other, okay? And you usually don't find too many women with a degree in biochemistry, all right, hanging out at the rodeo every other weekend or something during the summer. And you usually don't find that many guys who have a high school education and have a job that's, maybe a plumber or something, that spend the Friday evening at an art gallery. All right? But this is creating a schism in which you're going to have way more women with higher education and way fewer men in those areas. And this is going to lopside the whole dating game for women. I read an article that was talking about that this, in some places, like in Utah, I'm picking on Utah again, but in Utah, women getting breast implants in order to, because they, and there's this really strong idea of getting married and having children. And so the women find that there's not as many men out there as there are women who are wanting to settle down. So they get breast implants and all this other cosmetic surgery so that they can be more attractive to the men that are out there. And, I'm just thinking if the trend this is a very new, recent thing, okay? It's not that long, maybe a decade, that this has really exasperated itself. In 20 years' time, if it continues, you're going to have, I mean, what the Bible says, 7 women to every one man, that the 7 women will come to the one guy and say, hey, look, we'll work and we'll take care of ourselves if we can just get married to you, you know. So anyway, you know, I don't know, maybe it's a fulfillment of some sort of scripture, I don't know, but the thing is, this is where I see that it's going to change things. That maybe you're going to see way more women who are single having children and, you know, having to rely on sperm banks. So there's going to be a lot more men that aren't, you know, growing up and women growing up that will not know who their natural father is. All right. They'll just know that he was some sort of eugenically superior individual who donated sperm. And at the same time, you may see more polygamy just because of the fact that now it's out there in the open. You know, I have someone on my Facebook who is a polygamist. You know, I mean, I have all kinds of people on my Facebook, but the thing is, it's kind of mainstream now. People don't go, oh my gosh, you know, he's got 2 wives. That's not so big a deal anymore. People are like, oh, well, that's cool, you know, and they turn on TV shows that feature families with one husband and several wives. But what I'm thinking is going to become more popular, though, is polyamory, because many people associate polygamy with religion, because usually it is associated with religion, in which the one man has 2 or 3 wives and they produce children, have families together. It's sort of, if he has 3 wives, it's like a 3-in-1 family situation. I mean, the kids all know who their mother is, but it's a shared family situation. And usually the women don't have relations with each other. I mean, they can, but if they do, that gets into more of a definition of polyamory, in which maybe if those 3 women and the man, you know, he spends the night with one of the women and the 2 women are in the other bedroom together, this could become more common as we are seeing a breakdown of the wall of separation, so to speak, on sexual orientation, where men and, you know, are saying, okay, you know, I like women, and women are like, I like men, and now it's becoming like, oh, well, who's available? And the thing is that this kind of thing can actually change the way we're going to see marriage way more profoundly than if Steve and Escobar, or Joe and Frank, or any of, you know, I don't know if Escobar is a first name, but anyway, the thing is where you're going to have 2 men get married or 2 women get married, you may see some modifications of the whole scheme. I personally think that's way more likely. On the other hand, you may see some sort of cooperative situations in which maybe there isn't a marriage, but there's a network of people that hang out with each other. The nuclear family is a really recent phenomena that existed in the 1950s, okay, and 60s. And it was when America kind of had a monopoly on the industrial output. So there were lots of good jobs, union jobs. Yes, I say that the very positive thing having union jobs, okay, because people need to, you know, obviously you need a counterbalance to the idea that, well, let's just pay the workers as little as we can and see what they'll put up with. But the thing is this, during that time period, you didn't need to have extended families. It was nice to have grandma in the neighborhood. You know, she could babysit, but it was very rare for that to happen. We may have a situation where we have to kind of get back to extended families in order for a family to even survive. Maybe mom and dad who are in their 60s might have to realize if they want grandkids, they're going to have to let one of their kids move into the house with them and start a family. Because as it is now, if we take a look at the idea that how much houses cost in many metropolitan areas in which that's where the jobs are at, you find that by the time a couple can afford to have a house, she's going through menopause. Let's say they get married at 30 and wait till they can have kids. Well, 15 years later, it's like, oops, well, no kids. So the thing is that these kinds of biological factors that cannot be gotten rid of through societal change will still play a huge role. Now, guys, on the other hand, the ones that are playing video games and looking at porn, many of them at least have the one luxury that they could say, well, maybe now that I'm 40, I should start looking for a wife. And some of them will find one. Okay? But the thing is, women don't have that luxury. And so you may see the women that want to have families have to go for different options. All right? Now, lastly, I'm wondering this could have a big effect on family composition. Now, here's a quote from Louis Pasteur. A bit of science distances one from God, but much science nears one to him. The more I study nature, the more I stand amazed at the work of the Creator. Yes, that's Louis Pasteur, okay, famous scientist. Now, the thing is that I think there's, some people blame Harry Potter for this, but I think there's a lot of it having to do with the internet accessibility to different ideas. But paganism's on the rise, okay? The idea of religion that's a little bit more on the spirituality. Some of it's Christian, some of it's Wiccan, some of it's not. But I will guarantee you, it is increasing, especially amongst younger, educated people. It's not, people that live in trailer parks. They're getting into the whole goddess worship and stuff like that. And, we may see a situation where religion becomes more of a personal, independent thing, much like, Mormon fundamentalist. They're not part of a big giant organization. They may only be small groups. They support one another. Okay, that's one problem with polyamory or polygamy is those people don't have a lot of support. Maybe their families disassociate themselves from them and stuff like that. And what do you talk about at a party if you just invited a man and two women who are all married to one another? Well, everything's going to be focused on their lifestyle. And so but maybe there'll be more social networks for that in the future. The thing is that as these kinds of things grow, whether it's because of the internet with more exposure, a lot of the truther movement, a lot of the independent media out there has a very strong component of questioning traditional religion. And on top of that, throwing in a lot of ideas that border on, a lot of people are sitting there griping about Illuminati and stuff, their ideas on some sort of organization like the Illuminati. At the same time, they're immersed in Gnosticism, because they're studying this stuff, they're starting to get immersed in Gnosticism, the stuff that the Templars were into, and even going back to the whole Noah, and all this kind of, I forgot the name of it, but a lot of the mysticism that's supposed to arise from the civilization that existed before Noah. So this kind of thing is going to be great. Oh, I forgot too. A lot of the what you call nationalist. Some people call racist. Some of them I think are racist, and some of them are they're like really into their Irishness or Germanness or something like that. So it's more that they're looking at their traditions of their ancestors or something. But they're getting into the pagan roots. They're getting back to those kinds of concepts, which they feel have been lost. And so you're getting more of this. And I'll say this, going back to Wicca stuff and going to the whole goddess worship. You better believe that if a group of educated women go out and get naked in the woods on the spring equinox, it's called skyclad prayer, do some rituals, that this is breaking their bonds with traditional ideas. Okay? I'm sorry. That's just a little different than going to Sunday school. And so this is going to leave many of them open to new ways of living as well. And as young kids see so much stuff dealing with magic and stuff in the movies and so forth, they get interested in it and they're going to gravitate to it too. So here we're having an intersection. And I'm going to bear with me just for a moment here. We're running out of time, but we're going to have an intersection. We have a change in the religious nature of the people, where it's no longer liberal conservative, but it might be super spiritualist, and traditional. We are seeing an economic shift in which a lot of men are kind of like dropping out, and there's going to be a surplus of women that are looking to settle down and have a family, so they have to look for different options. Plus, we have biotechnology that's offering those options, and they're going to offer more options in the future. Plus, two, we have a media that is giving people exposure to new ideas of sexuality and so forth, where people are thinking, hey, why not? And whether that causes them to adopt a different lifestyle or not, some of them are going to start questioning the whole concept of, I'm a man, you're a woman, let's get married. And I think that this is going to have a much greater impact than a lot of people think. That just sit back and think, oh yeah, that'll be like 2-3% of the population, whatever. And no. I think this is going to affect a much greater percentage of the population as time goes on, and our abilities to communicate to one another even get better than they are today. Okay? So all of these things converging, there's my prediction. 20 years from now, it's going to be a lot different. Okay? And unless there's some major changes, an economic collapse that would force people to become more conservative, because that's usually what happens. Some sort of war that would be devastating, and people are less concerned with, oh, let's try something new versus, hey, let's survive, and all those kinds of things that would send people back to be more traditional. Okay, those things could happen. But if things just kind of go the way they are now, yeah, I'm thinking it's going to be quite interesting. Anyway, I'm going to end the show there, and I hope you've enjoyed this. And all I want you to do is go investigate, think about these things, and if you want, put some comments when I put this out on YouTube underneath, and whether you like it or not, let me know. Tonight, what I would like to go over is something I haven't really touched upon at all, and that is gun control. My gosh, it's like big right now. You're hearing gun control all over the place. If you read the foreign press, some countries, they try to make it sound like America's so backward because Americans own guns. Now, America is not the only country that allows gun ownership, okay? But it is, I believe, the only country that includes within its constitution or foundational law the right to bear arms. And I want to explain this. And I'm not going to go over statistics. I could go over for hours fights over statistics, homicide rates, what gets included as a homicide, and so forth. Okay? I will point out that when you talk about gun deaths, and this is something a lot of people don't realize, gun deaths can actually include such things as when the police shoot someone. Okay? That's included as a gun death. But yet when it's all lumped together, it's sort of like when certain organizations, which shall remain anonymous at this point, but that they say that they promote family planning in the United States, and they'll talk about teen pregnancy. And then when you ask them what gets included as a teen pregnancy, and they actually will admit, if you prod them a little bit, that a married woman who's 20 years old and has a baby just before her 21st birthday gets included as a teen. It still gets included, I'm sorry there, the little cutoff. Still gets included as a teen pregnancy. And so a lot of gun statistics where it makes it look as if these are homicides, they don't break down the homicides as type. Is a suicide a homicide? No, but it still gets included in gun deaths. When gangs shoot it out, okay, that is actually a homicide. And some would say that should be included in the gun death statistic. But again, it's what people perceive as the truth that really is the truth. It's not necessarily, though, the actual image. So if you've got some mobsters shooting it out and one of them gets killed, still, when you throw in gun deaths, it makes it look like this is just some poor, innocent individual. So, but I don't want to talk about that so much. What I want to talk about, though, is this whole idea of the Second Amendment. Now, I've seen some very good presentations about this. In fact, I would encourage people to check Google and Google Penn and Teller gun control. And there's a really, really good explanation on what the Second Amendment was really all about. And again, I would encourage people to go there. But instead of really going into a whole bunch of detail about the arguments over where the comma is, which I know America's a legalistic country and we got more lawyers than all the other countries combined because we argue over where's the comma in a text. But you know, if there was a mistake, if Americans were not allowed to own weapons during the founding father era, and it was all supposed to just be something involving a well-regulated militia, which sounds like the National Guard. And of course, the National Guard is not just a group of guys that get together on the weekend. I mean, it actually is something that is military and is ultimately controlled technically through the state governments, can be nationalized in event of emergency. Now, the thing is, wouldn't the founding fathers, some of those founding fathers, have actually said that there should be gun control? That maybe people had mistaken the meaning of the Second Amendment? Now, I just like to bring in a few quotes here. To some of my foreign listeners, this may sound really weird, okay? Because in most foreign countries, including Western Europe, you don't really promote an idea of an adversarial relationship between the people and the government. And I think America could be somewhat unique in that respect. But America was, to a large degree, influenced by the ideas of John Locke. And John Locke did say that when people's natural rights, not the rights given to them by government, but their natural rights that they were given by God at birth and their virtue of being a human being, when those were violated, you had the right to rebel. Okay? Now, most countries don't have that. They don't have that little prenuptial agreement between government and the people. So, this may sound kind of shocking to people from other countries. But let me read a few of the quotes here from some of the people that, gosh, I would have thought that they would have known if the Second Amendment was not really for people owning weapons on their, and that being a right. And let's just start here with James Madison. Oppressors can tyrannize only when they achieve a standing army, an enslaved press, and a disarmed populace. Let me repeat that. Oppressors can tyrannize only when they achieve a standing army, an enslaved press, and a disarmed populace. Now, the United States had a tradition of not really supporting large standing armies until basically World War II. Okay? America tried to pick a fight with the British over Canada back in 1812. Yeah, that was actually America kind of poking there. They felt that Britain should be thrown out of the Western Hemisphere, kind of reminiscent of later, the Monroe, or I'm getting the dates on when Monroe was president, but that whole Monroe Doctrine. And what happened was, of course, America tried to get a bunch of military people together, form, call men to arms, and it just didn't work out very well. People weren't totally excited about going and taking Canada. And so, British came, burnt down the White House, and Andrew Jackson defeated them, and and New Orleans and so forth. But, ultimately, standing armies were not something America really wanted to do, much opposed as it was to Europe. Europe, a lot of countries had standing armies, and they like to parade them around a lot and dress them up, and that was sort of the way the king or even a parliament could, the leaders could, say this is our empire and don't mess with us type of thing. America didn't do that, and it wasn't until World War II that really changed. But ultimately, disarmed populace. Now, let's go to another one. Oh, yes, Thomas Jefferson. Didn't sign the Constitution, but, he was around during this time and was really a promoter of civil liberties. He stated, laws that forbid the carrying of arms disarm only those who are neither inclined nor determined to commit crimes. Such laws make things worse for the assaulted and better for the assailants. They serve better to encourage than to prevent homicides, for an unarmed man may be attacked with greater confidence than an armed man. Okay, it makes perfect sense. I mean, if you want to do something really, really, really bad to someone, okay, you put yourself into their shoes. And you got two houses on the block that are potential victims. One of them, you notice a gun rack in the back of a guy's pickup truck parked in the driveway. He's got an NRA sticker on his truck. And you just kind of know they have guns. And the other neighbor has something about, give peace a chance, and, the only arms we need are for hugging, those kinds of bumper stickers. Who are you going to go after? Okay, obviously you're going to go after the one, with all the peaceful stuff, because they're going to be an easier target for whatever nasty thing you're going to do. And in fact, in a sense, that actually can encourage crime. In the cases of rape, I mean, if you're in a country that bans any kind of self-defense weapons, then if you're some big guy, then you know that you can overpower your assailant. In the United States, you don't know if the jogger that you've just spotted on the trail could have a small gun, tucked away, and, in her jacket or something. And if you go after her, you see, I can't remember who it was. What was that quote? Something about pistol, some brand of pistol in the 19th century, and it was about God made man, but this particular gun made men equal. It also makes women equal in that sense. You can have some little 5'2" gal, and it's not so much the size of the guy coming at her that's going to count. It's the caliber of the bullet that she has hidden away in her gun, which is hidden away in, her jacket or whatever. So ultimately, many rapists are probably detoured. They're probably like, well, what is the risk here of going after this person? It could be death in America. Other countries might not be so much of a chance of, this resulting in your family burying you in a few days. Now, we can then go to George Washington, father of the United States, who stated, a free people ought not only to be armed and disciplined, but they should have sufficient arms and ammunition to maintain a status of independence from any who might attempt to abuse them, which would include their own government. See, echoes of John Locke there. Okay, echoes of John Locke. That's coming through with that. Now, in the remaining minutes, what I just want to point out here is this. There is no such thing as gun control in the modern world. There is gun allocation or designation, but not gun control in the sense of getting rid of the guns. Now, I remember there was one Democrat who was running for governor. I think he was eventually successful in Oregon. And I listened to him at the University of Oregon during one of his presentations, and someone asked him about gun control. And he just flat out said, is it a good idea to only allow the police and the military to be the ones that had the guns? Now, that was a very good point. Is it a good idea to only have the police and the military being the ones that have the guns? So you see, gun control, if you're saying, well, guns are bad, because most people that are for gun control automatically feel that guns are bad, the only thing they're controlling is if the citizens have guns. It doesn't count for the police, does not count for the government, military, and so forth. And as we saw with warnings from, founding fathers, that is something that maybe provides a certain counterbalance, okay, in the government's eyes, and also provides a certain level of maybe self-empowerment in regards to the people. Now, true, the people versus a cruise missile, if, we wound up with a dystopian future in the United States, of course the government has the cruise missiles. However, I would note, in Afghanistan, you've got a lot of people that are using arms that are not very powerful, and no one's, most of Afghanistan was never defeated by the NATO forces. Okay, if you look at a map, most of Afghanistan is not under control of NATO forces. And why is that? They don't have very good arms. Well, obviously, having any arms is, lethal to any kind of army in the area, including the United States one. So ultimately, gun control itself is a misnomer. It's not something that really should even be used in the argument. What both liberals and conservatives, and, well, in fairness, there's lots of liberals who actually support the Second Amendment. But the thing is, they should at least be honest and say that what they want is to disarm the general public. Okay? Disarm the general public. That's what's meant by modern day gun control. Not get rid of guns, but to disarm the public. And I will note that many of the people that are promoting gun control or disarming the public, they're rich celebrities and so forth that have armed guards, okay, that protect them. So they're protected, but they feel like maybe you're not as important as they are. So that, you shouldn't be trusted with this, but they could trust their security people to be armed and protect them. So think about that the next time you hear about that issue of gun control. Okay? Anyway, that's about all the time we have here. So take care and hope to see you back next week here at Unlock the Door Radio produced by UCY TV Productions. Take care.
You are listening to UCY.TV. Why don't you stick around for